Moon Knight, Marvel Studios' next show on Disney Plus. Episode 1 dropped this week on Wednesday, and there was a lot of hype going into this show. And I am not necessarily the comic book guy, the comic book reader. I enjoy MCU, the product, as far as film and TV shows have gone this far, but obviously I'm not into the comic book allure of it. And so when this show was announced, obviously I know nothing about the character. My guy Reggie, who's very into the comics, got me kind of the synopsis of who this character was and why he was important. And I decided that he gave me the opportunity to kind of look at the comics of, who this character was to get an understanding of it. But I didn't want to do that, so I wanted to go in kind of as blind as possible going into the show to not be biased one way or another way against it. But episode 1 of Moon Knight, starring Oscar Isaac as the character that we meet in episode 1 is Stephen Grant. And so the show opens up with Ethan Hawke's character, right? And he's putting these shards of glass into his shoes at this ritual, and he walks out, and that's the opening credits. And you see Oscar Isaac's character, Stephen Grant, wakes up with his leg chained around the bed. And so it's very weird at first, I will say that, but it seems as though this show is going to dive a lot into mental health and Egyptian history as well. And the description from Marvel describes this character having dissociative identity disorder. So yeah, we're going to dive into mental health aspect of it. And you see this character, Stephen Grant, working at this Egyptian art museum in London. And it's a lot of weird stuff going on. There's a lot of not knowing what's real, what's not. So we see him go to work at the Egyptian art museum, and his boss gets on him about working and not working. He forgets a date that he had with a tour guide tour guide coworker that he didn't even know he had gone on a date with. And so at this point, as always, you're trying to figure out what's going on, and you realize that there's a voice in his head, and the voice is telling him to give up his body, give up whatever he's going through right now, like just give it up, right? And so this cult-like ceremony for Ethan Hawke's character, where he determines if someone is good or bad. He has his crowd around him offering souls for judgment, and one guy comes up to him. He says, I want to, find out if I'm good or not. And Ethan Hawke's character takes by the arms, and he's like, yeah, you're good. And then an old lady comes up. It's like, I want to be judged. And, she comes up to him. He touches her, and she dies. Or before she dies, he said, no, your soul is bad, and it could be for something you do in the future. So he touches her, and she's gone. She's a goner. And one of these kind of hallucinations, Stephen Grant, kind of wakes up in the Swiss Alps, I believe, and he's being chased by these guys because he has this, what do they call it? A scarab, right? This Egyptian scarab. And they're chasing him, and and then he like blacks out, and he wakes up, and he has blood on his hands, and the guys that were chasing him are all beat up. And you see a couple of sequences like that where he blacks out, wakes up, and the guys are all dead or damn near bloody. And so you see that over and over, right? And you're trying to figure out what's a dream, what's not. He's trying to figure out what's a dream, what's not. He ends up getting chased. Steven ends up getting chased by Ethan's guys. I won't call them goons, his cult group. And when Arthur follows him to work, he has a following as well at his job, at Steven's job, and he lets him go after kind of touching. He does the touch thing with him and finds out and says, you have chaos in you. And that's when we see Steven run off again. He's chased through the elevator in his apartment. I'm kind of flopping around here. So much that happens in a short time during this episode. He finds a phone in a hidden compartment in his apartment where there's a cell phone and a key, where some girl named Layla calls him and calls him Mark. And so from the comics, I was told that his name was Mark Spector, which is the other side of this personality that we haven't seen yet, that we've only seen through the aftermath of the blackouts. And so towards the very end, he has a face-to-face through the mirror meeting with the other half, which is Mark Spector. And so Mark tells him, "You're not gonna die." When this monster chases him in the bathroom, "You're not gonna die. Let me have control." And that's when we see the final blackout episode during this portion where he becomes Moon Knight and defeats the monster at the end. And I know that was kind of me going through it, but it's so much that happens in this episode, kind of laying the foundation of this character, this guy with, I wouldn't even say split personalities at this point, because he doesn't know that there's another side of him, I guess. And I'm not a professional expert on that, but I think it's just multiple characters. Maybe I'm saying the same thing, but he doesn't know what's going on. So I guess that's a bad way to put it, but I'm putting in a perspective of him having characters on screen that we've seen, but he's unaware of, if that makes sense. So definitely, a great first episode to kind of feed us a little bit about what's going on here. Obviously, people that have read the comics, obviously people that know who Moon Knight is as a character. What the premise that I was given was the MCU's version of the Batman. And so, that obviously that got me excited, because who doesn't love Batman, right? And so episode 1, great episode, a lot of action, a lot of storytelling, kind of getting us a glimpse of who this character is, who these characters are, and laying the foundation for the next 5 episodes. Episode 2 will come out on next Wednesday, obviously, and we'll talk about that. Dane will be back on the podcast for episode 81, and we'll talk about that.